These past few weeks, I was really dead set on making my way to Chains of Horror. Then I realized that I still hadn't completed Octavia's Anthem, and it's a quest that I've heard a lot of different things about. No one has spoiled it for me, fortunately, but everyone has either been like, oh, it's just short, it's kind of short and sweet, I enjoyed it, and then there's like a million other people I've seen who just absolutely loathe this quest, who can't stand this quest, who tell me it's annoyingly difficult, it's frustrating for the sake of being frustrating. And I was just kind of like, how could that even be? Because I don't think I've ever played a cinematic quest in Warframe thus far that was actually difficult. Like, Warframe doesn't really, I think, do a great job all the time of making its gunfight, its actual combat difficult. That difficulty usually comes from you being underprepared or having the wrong frame or having the wrong weapon type, especially when dealing with Sentinels, which we did run into inside of Octavia's Anthem, and you had to make use of either your operator or make use of, obviously, the right weaponry to take them down, or just pull out good old Excalibur and pop 4 and spam the crap out of it. That always is a great fallback for someone like me who doesn't really have that much time in the game. Fortunately, it wasn't any of those things. Like, it didn't end up just being a pool of like really difficult enemies to defeat. It ended up being the final mission in Octavia's Anthem, which I personally really enjoyed. And I want to sort of preface the rest of this discussion by saying I've definitely come to a point where I love the sort of short story delivery of all of Warframe's cinematic quests. I mean, none of them are very long, but that's what I like about them. They're short and sweet, and they do a really good job of just delivering a lot of content within a very small space of time. I think this is something that video games in general struggle with. They're not very good, at least when it comes to like shooters and things that aren't just, you know, sort of point and click adventures, sort of Telltale style. They're just not good at telling short stories. You know, they always need like 4 or 5 hours, and then sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it drags on for too long. Like, storytelling's not an easy thing. Being a writer is not an easy thing. I understand why it's so difficult, but DE always just seems to be able to deliver just straightforward, well-directed, and well-told short stories. Like, I haven't really walked away from any of the cinematic quests feeling like that was a waste of my time, or that hasn't allowed me to grow more attached to the world of Anthem. I always feel like I've learned a little bit more, and then I know that there's a whole bunch more I can learn beyond that if I go ahead and look at the lore. So it's kind of like reading a really great short comic and then knowing there's a bunch of novels existing beyond that comic that can tell you a lot more about the world of that comic. That's really how Warframe's cinematic quests come across to me. So Octavia's Anthem was just another one of those. I don't think it even took me an hour, but when it was all said and done, I had a smile on my face, and I think more importantly, we got to grow a little bit closer to Ordis. I love Ordis. I don't know how other people feel about Ordis. I think I've heard kind of hems and haws about Ordis, but I just think he's a wonderful little goofy AI who has an excessive level of loyalty to his operator that I find unbelievably charming. There's just something about an individual like him who comes from a background where he could essentially be very powerful. He could sit right alongside of Cephalon Samaris, and this is something we've already dealt with in other quests, but he instead chooses to continue to serve the operator. You know, he feels as if he owes his life to the operator, and in turn, inside of Octavia's Anthem, we as the operator, Tenno, we feel we owe our life to Ordis, because at the end of this mission, when we realize that Cephalon Suda, who of course is the main reason we're here, she's got this interest in music, and we realize she's acting a bit weird, and she's like, oh, I'll help you guys get the Manticore, and we'll find Octavia's Anthem. So you get to go about all these smaller missions, playing the pieces of Octavia's Anthem, slowly realizing that Suda is actually becoming corrupt by Hunhao. It's at that point that Ordis sacrifices himself to go inside of Suda's precepts to save her, and the operator, of course, can't leave good old Ordis behind. Just puts such a smile on my face. Like, there's like not many things that happen in this quest, but that was really the meat of it for me, was the whole interaction with Ordis and the operator and Suda. And of course, Cephalon Samaris is just there being Samaris. You know, he is, without a doubt, the biggest asshole in all of Warframe. I mean, there are people who are evil, pure evil. Hunhao, the Stalker, who is just a pain in my ass. They are less of assholes than Samaris is. Samaras really just is always trying to ride that line. And you know what? With Octavia's Anthem, I was kind of like, listen, you can say whatever you want. You can show up and kind of help us at the end. But given the chance, I'd shut you down in a heartbeat. Because I feel like one day, you're just going to murder everyone. Because you're just a lunatic on the brink of lunacy. And I guess that's another interesting thing about this quest, is that we get to see Samaras attempt to come across in two ways. He shows up and he's kind of like, oh, yeah, you know, let's help him out while they're dealing with Hunhao here. I said I wasn't going to, but now I'm here. And then at the end, Suda doesn't really remember what happened after she's released from Hunhao's control. And he plays it off like, I was doing it for the greater good of our people. And you don't believe him. That's the funny thing, right? Typically that line, when that's played out in storytelling, you're like, oh, he's the good guy. He's just trying to act like he's, you know, tough around the edges. No, you really feel like he's actually telling the truth. He's really only here because he realized there was the potential threat of him himself being infected by Hunhao's corruptions. So I don't know how you guys maybe came away from that one, how you feel about Samaras at that point in the story, but I still feel like he's an asshole. So, moving into the actual gameplay mechanics of that end quest, we go inside of the precepts of what is now Hunhao Suda to save Ordis, and of course to try and save Cephalon Suda, and we find ourselves on this sort of giant Manticore platforming mission. And I absolutely fell in love with this. It's simple, it's kind of goofy, but it makes use of the movement systems in Warframe, and once again, it is something different. They always manage to deliver something a little bit different with each and every one of Warframe's cinematic quests. And in this case, there was a lighter focus, I think, on the storytelling compared to something like The War Within, and a larger focus on what can we do with this final fight? How do we make this like a fun little gameplay thing? And they just turn it into a platform, and they're like, hey, you gotta step on the right notes and make sure you don't leave behind any bad notes, and then this sweeping wave of energy is gonna come along and it's gonna play Octavia's Anthem. And once you get Octavia's Anthem finished, it's going to help Cephalon Suda remember and break free of Hunhao's corruptions. It was simple, it took a little bit to wrap your head around it, but the thing I loved about it most was how you could actually play it by ear. So one of the things I saw after I finished the quest, I kind of wanted to see what other people thought of it, and I realized that there's a huge portion of the community that really didn't like this quest. They were really frustrated with it, and they felt like it was too difficult to see the wrong notes. It was too difficult to just do, right? I didn't find it that challenging, but I think that was because shortly after I realized how it worked, how I had essentially solved what the puzzle was and began to solve it, I realized that it was a lot easier to just stop and listen. So the few times where I was down to like one or two bad notes, I would just stop and listen. And you could hear the repetition in notes, or you could hear the wrong note within Octavia's Anthem, and then head over there and usually find it. And that was fun. You know, that was a very interesting instance of a quest becoming easier to solve because I just had to stop and listen. Believe it or not, as much as audio is important inside of video games, it's rare that we get to use it in such a way to solve a puzzle. Typically, puzzles are visuals. You know, they make use of the physical objects within the game world. They rarely give you some sort of an additional way to solve them through audio, and that's exactly what we got in Octavia's Anthem. And man, oh man, did I absolutely love that. And then the whole thing sort of wraps up with probably the best piece of Ordis ever, which is Ordis just absolutely losing himself in the fact that he is finally getting to fight alongside of his operator in battle. Maybe I love Ordis a bit too much, but I got emotional, man. I really did. I'm kind of getting emotional now just thinking about it. I was like, dude, Ordis, you are the coolest, my little friend. I love you, bro. You're a good little guy, and you and me, we're going places. It was like a weird, heartfelt moment. You know, you hear Ordis pretty much say the same thing again and again and again when you're sitting inside of your lander. And yet it never gets old. I don't know what it is about Ordis for me, but there's just this really great connection that I've developed with him in the, like, going on, 300 hours now that I have in Warframe, and I just don't get tired of him. And I don't get tired of hearing him say the same voice lines. They always make me smile. I don't know, man. It's like being in a really good relationship. It's like where you don't care how many times someone does that same goofy thing they do. It just makes you smile anyway. And that's kind of a weird thing to say about a video game character, but I think maybe that just says a lot about the way Ordis has been written and the way we've been able to interact with Ordis, albeit on a minimal level, throughout these cinematic story quests. So Octavia's Anthem, ladies and gentlemen. A quest I thoroughly enjoyed, and at the end of the day, it came down to two things. I really enjoyed their alternative take on a boss fight, that focus on movement and platforming rather than gunplay, which honestly, I feel like sometimes Warframe's gunplay isn't really its strongest suit. So them sort of stepping away from that and focusing on what I feel to be the stronger suit, which is movement, was a really nice surprise. And of course, Ordis. As much as I like the music in Octavia's Anthem, as much as I like the music in general, at the way they've implemented it into Warframe, and seeing Samaris be even more of a asshole / I'm not an asshole, but I'm definitely still an asshole, and being able to save Suda, it was Ordis, and it was that final platforming segment that really did it for me. So a fun, sweet but short quest, and I think another great entry in the short stories that have become the cinematic quests of Warframe. Bravo, DE, bravo. I'm looking forward to moving on to the horror of Chains of Horror, and then shortly after that, hopefully making my way, of course, into the most recent quest, which I always forget the name of, but I know everyone is pretty stoked on. So, cinematic quests, onward! Feel free to leave your thoughts on Octavia's Anthem down in the comment section below, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. Remember, of course, this is just my opinion and perspective on this short cinematic quest. Let me know yours down in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.